Hands were still cold from the parking lot when I heard it. My son's voice. Coming from the side of the house. I stopped walking. I hadn't even rung the doorbell yet. I was 20 minutes early. I'd misjudged the traffic from Columbus, took the exit off 71 without the usual backup. I figured I'd help my brother set up, maybe grab a beer with him before the rest of the family arrived. It was Thanksgiving. I was in a decent mood for once. But that voice, I know my son's voice. I'd known it since he was 7 years old and used to talk to himself while building Lego sets in the basement. Even through 2 closed doors, I could always tell when it was him. I followed it around the side of the house to the garage. The door was cracked open, not all the way, just enough to let a thin triangle of yellow light out into the cold. Inside, sitting on an overturned plastic storage bin next to my brother's riding mower, was my son. He was 20. Home for the holiday break. He'd driven 4 hours from Purdue in a car that didn't have working heat because he didn't want to ask me for money to fix it yet. He had a paper plate on his knees. On the plate was a gas station hot dog, still in that thin foil wrapper they put them in, and a handful of chips from a bag that looked like it had come out of someone's coat pocket. He hadn't heard me come around the corner. He was just sitting there eating, staring at the floor, alone in a garage in the dark on Thanksgiving. I stood there for a second. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Then he looked up and saw me. The expression on his face, I don't have a word for it. It was a mix of things. Embarrassment, relief, something that looked almost like shame, but it wasn't his shame to carry, and that's what broke me. That look is the reason I'm telling this story. "Dad," he said, "you're early." "Yeah," I said. "What are you doing out here?" He looked down at the plate. Aunt Deborah said, she said I should wait out here until the other guests arrive and get settled. He paused, because of the smell. I blinked. What smell? He looked at his hands. They were clean. He'd clearly washed them, but he worked 30 hours a week at a Starbucks near campus. Morning shifts, 4:30 a.m., steam wands and ground coffee and milk froth. He said sometimes the smell stuck to his jacket even after washing. She said I smell like a barista, he said quietly, and that some of her guests have sensitivities. I looked at my son, 20 years old, working 30 hours a week while carrying 16 credit hours so he wouldn't have to take out more loans than necessary, getting up before the sun 6 days out of 7, making his car payment on time every month, driving 4 hours in a car with no heat to come to a family Thanksgiving, sitting in a garage, eating a gas station hot dog, on a folding bin, in the cold. "Stay here," I said. "Don't move." I went around to the front door and rang the bell. My brother Marcus opened it. He looked surprised to see me. Again, I was early. He had a dish towel over his shoulder and a glass of red wine in his hand. Behind him, through the foyer, I could see the dining room already lit up. Long table, white linen, good china, candles, centerpiece with those little gourds and dried wheat stalks. The whole thing. "Mike," he said. "You made it. Come in, come in." "Deborah's just finishing up Is my son in your garage?" I said. His face shifted. Just slightly. "Well, yeah." Deborah thought it would be better to. "Better," I said. "She has guests coming who are—" "Marcus," I said. "My son drove 4 hours to be here. He's sitting on a bin in your garage eating a gas station hot dog." Marcus looked at the floor for a second. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. That's the most I can say. "Deborah has a specific vision for the dinner," he said finally. "You know how she is?" I did know how she was. I'd known how she was for 11 years since Marcus brought her home to a 4th of July cookout, and she spent the whole afternoon telling my mother that the house could use a lighter touch. She was the kind of woman who cared enormously about what things looked like from the outside, which guests matched the aesthetic, which cousins could be mentioned at the table without lowering the room. My brother was a regional director at an insurance company. He made good money. He'd married into more of it. Deborah's family was old Columbus money, the kind that went back 3 generations and still acted like it meant something. They lived in a house in New Albany with a circular driveway and a whole room they called the library that I'd never once seen anyone read in. I was a high school history teacher. I drove a 2018 Jeep with a cracked bumper. I was fine with all of that. I've been fine with it for 20 years. But I was not fine with my son sitting in that garage. I walked past Marcus into the house. The living room was already full of people I half recognized. Deborah's sister and her husband, a couple from their neighborhood, whose names I could never remember. 2 people from Marcus's firm who apparently always got invited to family dinners because they golfed together. Deborah was in the kitchen doorway in a burgundy wrap dress, holding a wooden spoon, laughing at something someone had said. She saw me and the laugh faded to a smile. Controlled. Practiced. "Michael," she said, "you're early. Can I get you something to drink?" "I want to talk to you about my son," I said. The room got quiet in that way. Rooms do when the background noise suddenly drops away and everyone pretends to be looking at something else. "Of course," she said, keeping the smile. "Maybe we could step into the kitchen." "He's in your garage," I said, "on Thanksgiving." She tilted her head slightly. He arrived smelling strongly of his workplace, which I know isn't his fault, but I have guests with sensitivities, and I thought it would be better for everyone if he freshened up and joined us once things got started. I didn't exile him, Michael. I just asked him to wait. "On a storage bin," I said, "with a gas station hot dog." I had Marcus bring him something to eat. "A gas station hot dog," I said again. She held the wooden spoon in both hands. I didn't realize that would be a problem. He works in food service. I assumed he'd be comfortable with. "He works at Starbucks," I said, while maintaining a 3.4 GPA in mechanical engineering. "He gets up at 4:30 every morning. He makes his own car payment. He drove here in January weather to spend the holiday with his family, and you put him in the garage." She pursed her lips. "I understand you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. And I meant it. I wasn't upset. I had moved past upset somewhere between the storage bin and the front door. I was something quieter and colder than upset. I'm just making sure I understand what happened before I decide what to do next. She glanced around the room. A few of the guests had given up, pretending not to listen. "Michael," Marcus said, coming up behind me. "Let's all just— How long has there been a photo wall in the hallway?" I said. Marcus frowned. "What?" "The hallway. There's a framed wall. Lots of photos. Family stuff." I passed it on the way in. I looked at it while I was walking by. I counted 14 frames. Not one of them has Tyler in it. Silence. Not the polite, uncomfortable kind. The real kind. The kind where people stopped chewing. Tyler. My son. 20 years old. Who'd been part of this family his entire life. Who'd spent every Easter in this house growing up. Every Christmas morning. 3 separate Thanksgivings before tonight. Who'd helped Marcus move furniture when they bought this house 6 years ago. Who'd mowed their lawn for 2 summers in high school because they went to Europe and needed someone reliable. Not one photo. In 14 frames. Deborah's face did something complicated. "We've been updating the wall," she said. "It's a process. We haven't gotten to everyone yet." 14 frames, I said. Your sister's kids are in 6 of them. Your book club friends made the wall. Tyler hasn't. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. "Mike." I moved away from the hand. "My son is in your garage," I said, raising my voice just enough that no one in the room could pretend not to hear. "Eating alone. On Thanksgiving. Because his jacket smells like coffee. Because he works for a living." I looked at Deborah. I've been watching this for years. The comments about his job. The questions about whether Purdue was really the right fit or whether he'd applied anywhere more, and I believe your word was rigorous. The way your kids talk over him at the table. The way you seed him at the end, near the kitchen, away from your friends. I paused. "The garage tonight was just the first time you didn't bother to hide it." Deborah opened her mouth. Closed it. "I want my son at that table," I said. "The main table. Right now. Or we're leaving. Both of us." She looked at Marcus. He didn't look back at her. "Of course," she said. Her voice was different now. Smaller. "Of course Tyler can sit at the table. I never said he couldn't. I just thought temporarily." "I'll get him," I said. I went back out through the front door. Around the side of the house. The garage door was still cracked open. Tyler was still sitting on the bin. He'd finished the hot dog. He had his phone out, but he wasn't looking at it, just holding it. "Come on," I said. He looked up. "What happened?" "You're coming inside. You're sitting at the table. No more garage." He didn't move right away. "Dad, it's fine. I don't want to cause a thing." "Tyler, seriously. I know how Aunt Deborah is. It's not worth it." It's worth it," I said. "You're worth it. Come on." He stood up slowly. He was taller than me by 2 inches, had been since he was 16. He looked at me for a second with an expression I recognized. He was trying to figure out how bad it was going to be inside. "They're going to act weird," he said. "Probably," I said. "Come on anyway." We went inside together. The dining room had gotten quieter than a room with 20 people in it should be. Marcus was refilling wine glasses, moving around the table with the practiced efficiency of a man trying to look busy. Deborah was in the kitchen. People were finding their seats, talking in low voices that stopped or shifted when Tyler and I walked in. I pulled out the chair 2 seats from the head of the table. Not the end, not near the kitchen, and pushed it toward Tyler. He sat down. I sat next to him. Deborah came out of the kitchen carrying a serving bowl of green beans. She set it on the table without looking at us. Her sister glanced over, then back at her plate. One of the guys from Marcus's firm said something to his wife about the traffic on 270, and she responded, and they had a whole little conversation, and I appreciated them for it. Dinner happened. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't warm. But Tyler was at the table with real food, with a cloth napkin and a water glass and a view of the whole room instead of the underside of a lawnmower. At some point, Deborah's sister asked Tyler what he was studying. He said mechanical engineering. She asked what year. He said sophomore. She said, "Oh, good for you. That's a tough program," and the tone people use when they're trying to recover from something they were part of, and he said thank you and passed the rolls. It wasn't much, but it was something. After dinner, Marcus found me by the back window while Deborah was organizing dessert. "You embarrassed her in front of her guests," he said, quietly, without accusation, which surprised me. "She put my son in the garage," I said, just as quietly. He looked at the floor. He had the same jaw as me, the same slightly crooked nose from a Little League game 30 years ago. We'd grown up in the same house, gone to the same schools. Somewhere in the last decade, we'd ended up in very different rooms. "I know," he said. "That surprised me too. She has a way of..." He stopped. Tried again. "She cares a lot about how things look." I let that become more important than it should have. I should have said something when she told Tyler to go wait outside. He paused. I should have said something a long time ago. I didn't respond to that right away. There are things that need a minute to land before you decide what to do with them. "Tyler works hard," I said. "I know he does. He's a good kid." "He is," Marcus said. "And the thing about my brother is that he can't lie to my face. Never could. He meant it." "Then act like it," I said. "Both of you." He nodded. I went back to the table for pie. Tyler didn't say much on the drive home. He was following me in his car as far as the highway split, and we talked on Bluetooth for a while. He said Deborah had come up to him after dessert and apologized. Said she'd been under a lot of stress and hadn't handled things well. Tyler, being Tyler, said he accepted it. "You didn't have to do that," he told me. "Somewhere on 71 heading north. In there. You didn't have to go at it like that." "Yeah, I did," I said. He was quiet for a second. I could hear his turn signal clicking. "It's just... I know you have to see those people," he said. "Marcus is your brother. Now, it's going to be weird." "It was already weird," I said. "We were just pretending it wasn't." He didn't say anything for a while. Then, "Did you really count the photos?" 14 frames, I said. "Not one of you." Another long pause. "That's kind of messed up," he said. "Yeah," I said, "it is." We drove for a while without talking. Just the road and the headlights and the sound of the engine. I thought about him at 4:30 in the morning, tying on an apron in a Starbucks on a street in West Lafayette while everyone else in his dorm was still asleep. I thought about his car payment, about the heat that didn't work, about the way he'd said it's fine in the garage like he was trying to protect me from having to fight for him. That's the part that stayed with me the longest. Not the garage itself, Not Deborah's face when I counted the photos out loud. Not even the hot dog. It was that he'd looked up at me from that storage bin and said, "It's fine, Dad." Like he'd already decided he wasn't worth making a scene over. He was worth it. That's the whole story, really. The rest of it, the table, the photos, what Marcus said by the window, that all matters. But the center of it, the thing I keep coming back to, is a 20-year-old kid sitting in the cold deciding he wasn't worth the trouble. He was worth the trouble. He's always been worth the trouble. About 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, Marcus called me. Not a text, an actual phone call, which was unusual. He said that Tyler's birthday was coming up in February, and he wanted to know what he was into these days, what he might want. He said Deborah was asking too. I told him Tyler had been trying to find a decent set of mechanics tools, the kind he could use on his own car, start learning to do his own maintenance. Specific things. A torque wrench, a socket set, a good floor jack. Marcus said he'd take care of it. I don't know what's going to happen going forward. I don't know if one holiday conversation fixes 11 years of a certain kind of distance. I hope it does something. I think Marcus meant what he said by the window. I think some part of him had been waiting for someone to say out loud what we both already knew. But whatever happens next, Tyler knows what happened that night. He knows I counted the frames. He knows I counted the frames. He knows I went and got him out of the garage. He knows he wasn't left out there. That part I'm sure of, and maybe that's enough to start with. I've thought about that storage bin a lot since November. Not the dinner, not Deborah's face when I said 14 frames out loud, not even the drive home on 71 with Tyler's headlights in my rearview. Just the bin. The way he was sitting on it like he'd already made peace with being there. Like he'd already done the math and decided the garage was the price of keeping things smooth. That's the part I keep returning to. Not what Deborah did, what Tyler had already accepted before I got there. There's something that happens to people who work hard and get told, quietly and consistently, that their kind of hard work doesn't count. It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow. It's a comment here, a seating arrangement there, a photo wall with 14 frames and none of them yours, and somewhere along the way, if nobody pushes back, the person starts to believe it. Starts to sit on the bin without being asked twice. Starts to say it's fine, Dad, before you've even had a chance to decide whether it is. Tyler is 20 years old and he was already doing that. Already managing other people's comfort at the cost of his own dignity. And I had let it go on for years because I didn't want to make holidays difficult. Because Marcus is my brother. Because I told myself it wasn't that bad. It was that bad. I just hadn't looked directly at it until I came around the corner of that house and saw my son eating alone in the cold. Here's what I've come to believe, for whatever it's worth, the choices we make when it's inconvenient. When it costs us something, when it means a harder Christmas or an awkward phone call or a room that goes quiet, those are the only choices that actually mean anything. Everything else is just comfort dressed up as kindness. Tyler gets up at 4:30 in the morning. He carries 16 credits. He makes his car payment on time. He drove 4 hours in a car with no heat because he didn't want to burden me. That's not something to be embarrassed about in a room full of people with circular driveways. That's something to say out loud. That's something to put in a frame on a wall. What I said to Deborah that night wasn't eloquent. It wasn't some prepared speech. It was just the truth said at a volume where no one could pretend not to hear it. And I think that's mostly what these moments require. Not the perfect words, just the willingness to say what's real out loud, in the room, when it matters. Marcus called 6 weeks later about Tyler's birthday. That's not nothing. That's a man who heard something he needed to hear and is trying, however slowly, to act differently. I don't know how far it goes. But I know that none of it happens if I walk past the garage and ring the front doorbell and pretend I didn't see. You can't go back and unaccept things, but you can stop accepting them. And sometimes the most important thing you do for someone you love is just go around the side of the house, open the door and say, "Come on, you're coming inside." That's it. That's the whole lesson. The rest is just details.